What's up, my friend? Welcome back to another video. And in this one, we're going to talk about what I spend my money on for my home studio. This is a pretty highly requested topic, I'd say, because I think producers and composers love to see what other composers are getting, like the necessary tools that they need, maybe some of the guilty pleasures that they splurge on, and all of that stuff. But I'm a big believer that less is generally more when it comes to our equipment, because the more we have, the more overwhelmed we can tend to get with the equipment that we have. And it's just so much simpler to get the essentials, get what's really necessary for us, and then start making music from there and only buy what we really need when we actually need it, if that makes sense. So before we really dive in, if you want a companion guide to this video, I want to give you a guide I put together called the Composer's Toolkit. And this essentially organizes the 6 core components that I think you really need to build your home studio. And whether you're a beginner composer or you've been working in music for a long time, I think this guide will give you some clarity and help you refine the exact equipment that you will need for your studio. Maybe you find that you're missing a certain component or you have too much. This will kind of just nail it down for you in a very comprehensive and practical way. So I want to give that to you 100% free. Just click the first link in the description box and you can download it as my gift to you for checking out this video today. So without further ado, let's jump into everything I spend money on for my home studio. First of all, let's again cover some of the necessary equipment here. There's going to be more than 6 that as I cover in the guide that I just mentioned, but these are just all of the things that I could think of at the moment. So the first thing is, of course, a computer, because this is where you're going to be making your music. That could be a Mac from Apple, it could be a PC, Windows, it could be Linux, whatever operating system you decide to use, they all work for music production. So the very foundations are your computer. But you also need a DAW. So this is a digital audio workstation. There are many of them out there. Some of the most famous ones include Logic, Ableton, Cubase, Pro Tools. There's also Studio One. There's Fruity Loops. There's a whole bunch. But you kind of want to watch some tutorials on YouTube, go through some of the demo pages, try out some free trials if you can, and see which one starts to kind of fit your workflow the best. But you do need a DAW to kind of work in to produce your music. Then we also need a monitoring system. So how are you going to listen to your instruments or to your music? So is it through speakers like monitors on your desk, or are you going to be listening through headphones? Those are kind of the 2 core output systems that you would typically go with. Then you also need a MIDI controller. So this is more like an electric keyboard that you would plug into your computer, via USB or another input source. But you generally are going to be playing your ideas into your computer. Maybe if you're a pianist, most likely through the MIDI controller, or if you're maybe a guitarist or another instrumentalist, you can find a MIDI controller helpful in riding the mod wheel or playing with faders, pressing the pads, whatever it is. Typically a MIDI controller is necessary as well. Then we've also got the audio interface. So this little device, it could be quite large as well, but it typically converts incoming audio signals for the computer, but then it also sends it back for us to interpret in our listening. So this is a very necessary piece of equipment, and I'm going to share with you the exact unit I have in just a second. Then we also need a microphone. If you want to record live instruments or if you want to record vocals, this is what's going to be capturing the live audio, and then it's going into the audio interface, which then gets translated to a language that the computer can understand. And then finally, you're going to need HDDs and or SSDs for sample storage. Of course, we're talking more about the orchestral realm of things. So most likely, because you'll get sample libraries that are relatively large in the orchestral realm, you'll probably need large storage spaces for your sample libraries. I have a combination of both HDDs and SSDs. So whichever one you go with, just make sure it suits your needs as much as possible. So talking about that, let's get into my personal investments and examples of each of those things we just talked about. My computer is an iMac that I got in 2017. It contains a 4.2 gigahertz quad-core Intel Core i7, and I have 64 gigabytes of RAM that I purchased with the computer. It ran me about $3,000, give or take. Then I use Logic Pro 10. That is my only DAW of choice, and that costs, at the time of this recording, $200. Then I also purchased the Kali LP6 monitors for $150 each, so $300 in total. And then I also have Apple EarPods that I use for my music, which ran me $25, super affordable. And then I have the Arturia Keylab 88 for my MIDI controller, which ran me about $1,000 as well. In terms of my audio interface, I use the Apogee One, which is $300. And the Apogee One essentially is a little audio interface box that you can connect to your microphone to, but at the other end, you can also go out of it and connect it via USB into your computer if you need to. So it also acts as an adapter. Then for my microphone, I have the Blueberry, which is a specific vocal microphone, and that one ran me about $1,000 as well. In terms of my HDDs, I have the WD My Passports, and those were, I believe, 4 terabytes each, and I use them both. So they cost me about $130 each. And then for SSDs, I use the Samsung T7 portable SSDs. I got 2 of those as well. Each one is 2 terabytes, and then they cost me about $300 each. And then last but not least, of course, are sample libraries. And I've spent too much money on them over the years, upwards of $20,000, $30,000. So yeah, out of control for sure. But yeah, all of this, excluding the sample libraries, adds up to about $6,000 or so. But you can certainly get started with much, much less. And I was trying to go for equipment that would last me for decades, Like I wanted to pay for the quality so that I knew it was reliable and I could really use it over and over again without it breaking down. So I think that's there's a balance between a wise investment and maybe a foolish one when you're trying to save too much money, and so you buy really cheap equipment that just doesn't serve your purposes or breaks down really easily. Maybe find that balance between what you really, really need and find the quality to kind of match it. So how often do I use them, right? Because these are the equipments that I purchased, but how practical are they in my everyday use? And I'm talking mainly about music production, okay? Composing. So my iMac, 10 out of 10. I use it all the time. I mean, I have to use it to produce music on, so that's a no-brainer. My DAW, Logic, 10 out of 10, right? That's the only DAW I use, so I use it all the time. The Kali monitors that I purchased, 0 out of 10. I never use them. And that's my fault because I don't have a treated room. My home studio is actually in my bedroom, so I don't have it treated, and therefore I know that the image that the speakers would output would be inconsistent and incorrect, and that might influence my mixing decisions in a bad way. So I just don't use them right now. That could change in the future, but at the moment they're not serving any practical use for me right now. The Apple EarPods, I do all of my listening to, my producing on, my mixing on. So that's a 10 out of 10 for me. I also do have another set of professional headphones for monitoring and stuff, but I actually have not been using those because they're quite uncomfortable for my ears. So that's just a personal gripe there. The Arturia Keylab 88, 10 out of 10. I'm a pianist by trade. I'm a classical pianist, so I'm definitely going to be using it to play all my lines in, to play piano passages, to play all the orchestral stuff. It's my comfort place, so I use it all the time. The Apogee One, 5 out of 10. Reason I say this is because when I'm recording my music, doing mock-ups and stuff, I'm not always recording or recording live instruments, right? Or recording my voice. I'm not always singing. Sometimes I'm only using sample libraries. So in terms of practical use, it's about a 5 out of 10 for me. I use it about 50% of the time when I'm making music. Same goes for the Blueberry microphone. Again, a 5 out of 10 because the Blue microphone is connected to the Apogee One, which then connects to the computer. Specifically when I need vocals or if I need to record a different instrument, I will use this. But you can see I'm using this for my videos. I'm using it for voiceover work, etc. So it does get used there as well. Then we have the external sample storages. So my Passport HDDs, I use them 7 out of 10, so 70%. I don't always use them for my music. Sometimes I have libraries that are just on my main computer and I don't need the external libraries. So same goes for the SSDs. But just know that the majority of the time I am working with samples, so I am using those external hard drives for sure. And then sample libraries, 8 out of 10. Most likely I'm using them in my music, but in the cases that I'm not, I don't really use my external hard drives at all. So super simple. But what are the main takeaways here? So number one, I would just encourage you to invest in a good foundation So like the computer, the DAW, the MIDI controller, the sample libraries, like these are all necessary when it comes to producing orchestral music. You kind of need them. Of course, well, you don't really need a MIDI controller or you don't need sample libraries. Like you can get by with sound fonts or whatever they call them. But if you want good quality, if you want realistic results, it's worth investing in tools that will help you get there and not much more than that. Like invest in the necessary equipment, but don't invest in the frills outside of that. So that's kind of what I'm saying here. Also, yeah, don't overspend on less necessary things like hardware and plugins. Like you see those studios with racks and racks of outboard gear or tons of synths and tons of plugins in terms of software, just like hundreds of gigabytes. You really don't need all of that. Like most DAWs come with the necessary plugins you need. And even though they might not have all the functionality of the new plugins, the dedicated ones, they really do serve the purposes very well. So again, investing in that foundation, but not the frills, is a great way to approach building your home studio. You can really have a great setup for $1,000 to $3,000, I'd say. I think that's a pretty solid range. You don't really need to go outside of that, honestly. So, like the computer, you can build by yourself for a few $100s. The DAW, again, Logic is like $200 if you're using Apple, but you can get free DAWs as well. And MIDI controller, you can get a few $100 worth. Sample libraries, you don't have to go too expensive. There's some great free options like that in itself lies between $1,000, $2,000 or something. So yeah, you can get started very easily. But you really want to decide what direction you want to go in. Like, am I producing strict orchestral music? Do I want to create hybrid music? Do I need synths? Do I need, a microphone for vocals? And then you want to purchase the essentials from there. You don't want to just go out and buy stuff just for the sake of having it and then find out that you're not even interested in that style of music that that piece of equipment was meant for, right? That's like such a waste of money, and then you'll feel buyer's remorse and you'll hate yourself for it and so on and so forth. So don't go down that cycle. Start to think about what type of music do you want to write? What instruments will you need for those purposes? And then invest from there. What tools and what equipment do you need from there? Always start from the foundations and then go outwards. I think a really great question to ask yourself is, will this equipment, will this sample library, whatever it is, will it help me write better music? Be super honest with yourself when it comes to this question. If the answer is no, then that tells you the answer. You don't really need to invest in this new thing or this piece of equipment. If the answer is yes, it will help me write better music, ask yourself why. What will it do for my music that I cannot do currently with my equipment or my sample libraries? If you can really articulate that in a clear manner, then you know that it becomes a necessary piece of equipment or a necessary sample library for your collection. Of course, there's nothing wrong with buying sample libraries just for the sake of having them. Of course, if you have extra money to spend, if it just feels good to buy new sample libraries, of course, we all do that. I totally understand. But if you're on more of a budget and you want to be more financially responsible, I guess, then it might be a good thing to do. Like ask yourself, is this thing that I'm purchasing, is it really going to help me, or am I just buying it for the sake of having it? Okay. So I hope that kind of makes sense. Maybe let me know in a comment below, like, have you thought about equipment from this perspective? Do you have all the equipment you need for your home studio? Is there maybe one or two things that I mentioned in this video that gives you some ideas, maybe gives you ideas for new equipment, or maybe some things that you have too much of and you want to give away or put away because it might just overwhelm your process in the future? Let me know in a comment below. But again, I wanted to use this video to kind of share with you what I spend money on, but I also think it's also useful to share how practical those things I spent money on are to me as well. So you can see I don't use everything that I purchased, especially the speakers. That's a buyer's remorse item right there. But again, that could always change in the future. You never know. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how I run my studio or what I spent money on. And again, if you are building out your home studio, you want that necessary equipment and you want to know the bare essentials of what you really, really need to get started, then again, I want to give you the Composer's Toolkit. It's a super practical didactic guide that goes through those 6 necessary components. You can keep that as a PDF whenever you want to read it, you can pull it up. And I think it's super useful. It's helped a lot of my students as well. They email me and tell me, so I want you to have it as well, and it's completely free. So click the first link in the description box below. It'll take you straight there. You can download it as my gift to you. Thank you again. I appreciate you watching. I'll catch you in the next video, and take care. Bye bye.